So I've uploaded about 10 analytical videos on Total War now, and I've got a decent sample of more than 10,000 comments from those uploads, and of course, I've read them all, and I've noticed some patterns. One of the most remarkable things I've seen is the term unit diversity suddenly appear out of nowhere and start to repeat over the past few months. I had a section addressing this in my player freedom video because I'd already started to notice it by then. This is a term that, as someone else also observed, simply doesn't exist outside of Total War discourse, and to prove it, if you quote this term into Google, every single result is Total War related. This should be a big red flag. If you never come across the term anywhere else, and if the term doesn't have an analogue in any other gaming scene, then that has implications for whatever underlying truth that this strange construction, this neologism, is supposed to be tapping into and pointing towards. There's no unit diversity complaining about the Aztecs in Age of Empires 2, who have no cavalry or gunpowder whatsoever. There's no unit diversity complaint about Yuri and Red Alert 2, whose entire faction is built around Wololo. It's only in this particular situation of Total War in 2021 that this unique line of argument appears, and it's usually levelled at entire games. It's a specific apologetic for games like Warhammer, while simultaneously used to attack games like Shogun 2, and it's recurring. It keeps coming up and will keep coming up. That makes it worth further examination, as I see it. What it looks like to me is that people think unit diversity is a way that Warhammer sticks it to Shogun 2. So it makes sense when I upload a video like this that I get people trying to find ways that modern Total War games, especially Warhammer, are in fact as good as or better than Shogun 2. Maybe I'm too quick to suspect that a fan base this unashamedly debased and this capable of desperate barrel scraping might simply be entertaining yet more complete spuriousness. This whole thing could just be a knee-jerk motivation to redeem Warhammer. In that case, this would be a product of people scrambling to think about what makes Warhammer different, if not outright better, and they would of course immediately think of the fantasy elements and all of the different monsters and races, and that would become the unassailable knockdown defeater of Shogun 2. People need a reason to be playing these new games instead of older ones, because that is of course what they are going to do anyway. For most people, nothing can ever change that, and I'm not interested in trying. I only care about gameplay and the truth regarding gameplay. It's always been clear to me that this is their favourite toy, and you can't take people's toys away from them. Oh no. For a lot of people, this unit diversity term is their best attempt at justifying why they'll keep playing with their favourite toy, and justify it they must, lest their life lose all meaning and purpose. So it deserves some attention, if not for the sake of the people that say this shit, for the sake of the larger conversation and for the sake of the people that have to sit reading shit like this over and over and over again, wondering what the fuck it means, which includes me. I'm right at the front, but maybe we can do something about that. So if you're one of the people that were inclined to use this term unit diversity in your comments and conversations, do me a favour and pause the video and leave a comment explaining what you actually would mean when you said this before you unpause the video and continue. Thanks if you did. But now it's time to get into it. Alright, first of all, I don't think unit diversity is even the right phrase for the job. Diversity is usually reserved for groups of people. You wouldn't go to a cafeteria and say there's food diversity. You wouldn't turn on a TV and say there's diversity of channels. It would be unit variety or unit differentiation and not unit diversity. Just wanted to get that out of the way. Alright, to take the side of the unit diversity apologists and give a clear example of a failure of proper unit differentiation in an otherwise good game that I still regard highly and think did well in terms of unit differentiation otherwise, I'll use the Hastati and Principes of Rome Total War. Here is a side-by-side of their stats with the few differences highlighted. As you can see, in Rome Total War, Principes and Hastati are almost identical. The one and only major difference is that Principes have 2 armour more than Hastati. Principes have a few other minor differences, and here's an exhaustive list of all of them, but it's mostly a copy-paste with a different name and a different model in-game, a different skin, a reskinned unit. This is what I would consider to be a failure of proper unit differentiation and a failure of unit diversity. You've got the historical concept of Hastati and Principes to draw from. That's where the in-game name of the units comes from. A lot of players were eager to reenact early Roman infantry tactics of the Triplex Acies. I'll let Chris Christopherson of the NCR describe it, in case you're unfamiliar.
In big battles, Caesar deploys his legionaries in waves. Recruits up front, prime soldiers behind the recruits, the old guard bringing up the rear. Opponents wear themselves out dealing with the first 2 waves, if they survive that long. When the veterans step up, there's not much fight left.
Hastati! Break away for orders! Hastati! Break obeys!
And Rome Total War teases the possibility of this kind of gameplay with the names and descriptions of the units involved. The younger and inexperienced Hastati, eager to prove themselves on the front line, and the older veteran Principes at the back, with better armour, more cautious and disciplined, expected to be capable of decisive intervention should the Hastati fail to break the enemy. This doesn't come across in the game. There's scant difference between the two. If they're both on the field, the Principes are slightly better defensively, which means they're a marginally more effective anvil to a possible Hastati hammer, if you're going to attempt one. But swapping roles would have almost the exact same outcome because the units are not distinct. There exists little reason to arrange your infantry into redundant lines with Principes ready to relieve the Hastati. They have the same offensive capabilities and they have the same base morale. You're not incentivized to keep the Principes in reserve while the Hastati tire the enemy first, which could be achieved if, for example, Hastati had better stamina from their youth. Maybe give Hastati lower upkeep to reflect their relative abundance. Any of these would have been interesting for the gameplay in terms of keeping Hastati relevant, and also in terms of mirroring historical roles. Instead, one unit is a straight upgrade of the other. Hastati are simply obsolesced by Principes, and when they're on the field together, you use them indiscriminately. They're substitutable and exchangeable in every situation. Believe it or not, you can actually make Hastati into Principes by doing that. And now they are statistically identical. See that? You upgrade Hastati armour twice in custom battles and you've made Principes, for all intents and purposes. The difference between Hastati and Principes on Rome 1 is tantamount to the difference between Katana Samurai and Shimazui Katana Samurai in Shogun 2. That should put the situation into perspective. This isn't unit diversity, this is skinner boxing with small number tweaks. You're just collecting bigger and bigger numbers, which is the worst kind of gameplay there is. It wastes the effort of the artists to model the unit that's going to be seen only at the start of the campaign and then never again. It wastes what little thought might actually have gone into differentiating how they function on the battlefield, and it especially fails to utilise all of the complex game systems that were created to bring all of these units to life and give their gameplay their dimensions. It wastes the effort you invested into giving your veteran Hastati those good fights they had, to have them gain the experience they now possess while still remaining tragically obsolete. It's a bad situation and it was completely avoidable. All it would have taken is a bit more care and attention. Effort. Give Hastati more stamina and a faster attack. Give Principes less attack but more armour. As an aside, I'll point out that Rome 2 came along nearly a full decade later and compounded this failure to the extreme. But it's really hard to think of actual roles and tactical utilizations of the properties that we have here. Units are not distinguished. They're not really distinct. Like, see all these units here? They're all just clones. And then these units here, these three are just clones. Legionaries, Principes, Legionary cohorts. They're all the same unit. These are the same unit. In Rome 2, you have 13 different types of Roman legionaries, and they're all just copy-pasted with slight stat changes. I'm not kidding. All it takes is some campaign-side modifier buffs, and the line between all of these units easily blurs, and the whole roster becomes a meaningless, bloated mess. Good luck achieving any level of acquaintance or familiarity or mastery of utilisation of all of this utterly superfluous copy-pasted crap. Skinner box, reskinning. Reskinner box, unit diversity. So this situation with Hastati and Principes in Rome 1 is a failure to diversify, a failure of unit diversity, one of the earliest in Total War. You have two units with two different names, two different skins, two sets of stats, but these barely different stats don't meaningfully influence player decisions with respect to the gameplay, and so they don't permit the player to use these units in distinct ways, and certainly are not drawing from the historical roles these units represent in-game. They can't possibly do any of that like this. The only role Hastati serve in this game is to eventually be replaced due to their built-in obsolescence. It's a failure, and it's in a game where you have spears, phalanxes, phalangites, scouts, lancers, cataphracts, camels, elephants, slingers, archers, war dogs, incendiary pigs, everything. There's immense unit variety across the rest of the game. But when you zoom in and examine the quintessential faction of Rome and look at their early game Tier 1 and Tier 2 base melee units, there's an unusual lapse. It's tragic, and I think it's completely unnecessary in a game with so much attention to detail everywhere else.
They're attacking us!
If stat differences don't affect any gameplay decisions regarding unit usage, and there's almost no possible way these trivial ones ever could, then they're surely meaningless stat differences and the extra unit is simply wasted. So that's an example of what unit diversity would have to mean to me, at least in order for it to mean anything worth a damn to me whatsoever. And when I asked my communities what they think the term unit diversity means, a lot of people were savvy enough to see where this was going and speculated along these exact same lines as I'd like to elaborate. To give an example of good unit differentiation that produces interesting gameplay, I'll borrow an example from a long-time viewer and patron. In Age of Empires 2, you have an interesting rock, paper, scissors system with the naval combat. Fire ships beat galleys with short range damage per second. Galleys outnumber and outrange demolition ships, which then explode harmlessly. Demolition ships easily get inside the range of fire ships and detonate with devastation. There's a triangle that keeps players on their toes and thinking. It forces players to pay attention to friendly and enemy composition, to their own resources, to terrain and choke points. Endless gameplay folds out from this rock, paper, scissors system. 20 years later, players are still pushing this dynamic and seeking an edge. This is only possible because the units involved are so fundamentally different and have all of these possible different interactions. This reminds me of Shogun 2's strong rock, paper, scissors of Yari and Katana and Horse. The name of the unit is trivial. The appearance of the unit is trivial. Renaming and reskinning units is window dressing. I'm not being hyperbolic, it's as superficial as it gets. Obviously the name of units is important on some level. Just look at the names of the units in the Europa Barbarorum mods and how much thought went into those. And obviously the appearance of units can be important. Just look at the amount of detail that goes into Elves and Lord of the Rings mods, and think about how likely people are to zoom in and compare them to the real deal. And think about how hopeful the modelers would have been that players would share their delight in their end result. But what actually matters to me, and to anyone else that wants to actually play these games and not just look at them, to treat them like the piece of interactive media that they are, to experience the actual challenge they exist to provide, is the gameplay itself. Shogun 2 has 4 highly distinct basic spear units and they all function completely differently, and I spent nearly 20 minutes describing this difference in a video on my second channel. This is the most dull and generic, passive and inactive, inert and static type of unit in all of Total War. Spears. Spear Mani-E, as it gets memed. And here's the 4 most basic bottom-feeding variants in the game. You could bring one of each of these 4 units to any given fight in Shogun 2, and they would all be doing different things, and that follows from their properties, because the different properties change how they fit into the game environment and its systems. Yari Ashigaru would be in Yari Wall in the most defensible position on the map, with the rest of the fight pivoting around them. Yari Samurai would be moving to aggressively flank, only able to be caught and punished by the very cavalry they want to isolate in that exact way in the first place. Naginata Samurai would be doing all of the risk taking, compelling enemy archer fire and nullifying the most dangerous enemy melee units. Its low charge, urging it to seek favourable positioning and stand its ground to make the most of its primary property, its armour. An otherwise similar unit, but one at the opposite end of the armour spectrum, Naginata monks. They would be trying to sneak their way into the melee on the flank to find units with low morale, shredding them in the melee with their unmatched melee prowess, war crying at the perfect moment to expedite the break and precipitate the chain route across the entire enemy line. These easily conceivable and clearly articulatable different behaviours all follow intuitively from the properties of the units, and they all do this together on the field to become greater than the sum of their parts, and they do all of this while allowing for variables like terrain and fatigue and morale and enemy army composition and positioning to be considered. Meticulous factoring of all the aforementioned being rewarded with certain success, even against a superior opponent. Meaningfully distinct properties of units in these games sees them have emergent roles and allows interesting and complex tactical situations to unfold for them. There is specific, sharp, clearly articulatable effective usage that sensibly follows from an understanding of their properties. This is why I was so annoyed with the Nanman DLC for Three Kingdoms. You have these giant flamethrowers, which are mechanically completely different from anything else to come before them in the game, and maybe even in all of Total War history. They should be an oasis of novel gameplay opportunity for all curious players, and the developers should be prioritising them accordingly, but they didn't even work properly when I tried to use them. They had bad implementations that completely crippled the ability of the player to try to use them creatively in the most proximately intuitive, favourable gameplay situations. It made it obvious that the developers didn't even play their own game. It's a headline-grabbing feature, arguably even more so than the elephants that the game introduced alongside it. The first attempt at elephants in a Total War game in 5 years, by the way. And it should surely have been given a lot of attention to make sure it's robust, and that player attention and investment will be rewarded with satisfying gameplay, but there's just nothing you can really do with it. It doesn't really fit into the game in any way. I think it's only there because it stirs up the imagination and incites interest in the DLC it's a part of, for the players that come to the game from the romance novels having read the historical accounts of flamethrower machines in ancient China. In that sense, it's a lot like the Greek culture pack of Rome 2, the pre-order bonus, introduced to produce flights of fancy and provoke the imagination, but when you actually come to terms with it in-game, it falls flat. Oh, we're on the battle map for the first time ever.
Reinforcements are coming from behind.
Let's look at your Spartans.
Look at this.
Oh man. Look at those beards, man, they look like gnomes.
See?
Your Spartans look ridiculous. They look like little gnomes.
Look at these gnomes.
What the fuck?
Why do they all get beards?
It's like their beards are like
amazing.
glued on or something. Or to go back even further, it's like the Tetsubo heroes of Shogun 2. Bonus when fighting against cavalry, so this is another artifact, another strange glitch. It doesn't need to say bonus versus cavalry here. They took the value out without removing the string or something, it's just hasty and rushed. So this is a pay-to-win unit that hasn't been done properly, just like this one. Shogun 2 was made a worse game by these poorly conceived and hastily implemented units. units that you have to pay money for and that people without are disadvantaged by their lack of in multiplayer. So these are paid for units and they produce roster bloat in single player and they produce a pay to win situation in multiplayer. You're paying to make the game worse. I don't like that these units exist in the game. You pay money to get them and they serve little purpose, so they can mostly be ignored. They're basically just another Naginata. It's a Naginata samurai hero. 2 of them. With slight differences. Hold firm. Hold firm. Look at that. Basically redundant. Excellent armor. And it doesn't say excellent armor here, so it's not even... Makes no sense. Yeah, so forget about these 2. Naginata samurai heroes, 2 of them. And the only difference is the model. So this is where the Warhammerization has begun. These 2 units are basically identical, but they have a different model. This one's male and this one's female. So even though they charged money for these units, they didn't even define them within the game. So all of the effort to define and disambiguate the units was made in the base game, and when you pay money, all you get is filler, so no one cares about these units. The only thing it's not got in its favour is number of men, 120, but its armour preserves it, its ability to rely on guns and outrange preserves it. It's an overpowered unit. 850, holy fuck. 850 when Katana Samurai costs 100 less. My god, not fucking balanced. And then Donderbus Cavalry. Holy shit, man. It deletes units. Another pay to win unit. Fucking just deletes units. You pay $7 for the DLC or $10, whatever it is, and you get shotguns on horses. What the fuck? They even have good armor. They even have 15 charge bonus, and look at this shit again, bonus versus cavalry. Why does it say this line? Get off my interface. Fuck off. And they have 12 melee attack, which means they have melee attack that is way higher than Yari cavalry. Guys with shotguns have higher melee attack than guys with giant spears. Fucking pay to win. They have higher morale too, holy fuck. Just give some Portuguese guys shotguns, put them on horses, and let them run around Japan, deleting units, and they can shoot through themselves, holy shit. The guys at the back of the block can shoot through the ones at the front, like on Warhammer. That's how rushed this is. It's like Warhammer levels of half-assed and not thought out. My god. And yeah, did I mention they use shotguns that can fucking... one shot can kill like 5 guys? Did I mention that? The only thing is, they have a range of 50. Which doesn't matter because they're on horses, and a range of 50, a lot of the time, is the same as having a range of fucking 500, because nothing can catch them unless they let them. Guys running on foot with melee weapons never get into a fight with Donderbus Cavalry unless Donderbus Cavalry let them. Pay to win unit, the most pay to win fucking unit I've ever seen, holy shit. I hate this DLC pay to win cancer. Fucking ruins my games. And then, if Donderbus Cavalry aren't bad enough, Tokugawa mounted gunners. You're paying to make your experience diluted in single player and less competitive in multiplayer. The corrupting effect of money. The zero-sum exchange of their profit for your gameplay, and you're complicit. So what Total War is going for today is expansions and faction packs where you have a lot of units with a lot of different names and a lot of different appearances, but that don't necessarily add to the gameplay in any meaningful way. You should not be happy with this situation, and you should not be excited at the prospect of further dilutions. It's like how you have bows and crossbows and slingers and gunners that all flaccidly spurt low velocity projectiles in an arc, filling the air with colourful confetti piss streaks. Gone are the firearm tactics of previous Total War games. Gone is the majestic, elegant feeling of Slingers of Rome 1. Gone is the powerful, sinewy crossbow feeling of Medieval 2. Instead, you have a fireworks show. Something to look at, but that's almost impossible to think about. I don't care about looking at my unit diversity and the unit names. If I did, I'd have played mods like Europa Barbarorum and Roma Surrectum for Rome Total War, which I didn't. I don't care about sitting looking at my unit diversity in the models. If I did, well, I probably would play Warhammer. But I don't. I care about interacting with unit diversity, and I care about gameplay that challenges me to think about it in deeper and deeper ways, and that forces me to make use of it in increasingly interesting and ambitious ways. And to make it even cooler, maybe it even manages to do what Shogun 1 set out to do in the first place, to kick all this off and to get this show on the road, to make me feel like a general.
Sun Tzu teaches us that the great general first seeks victory, then seeks battle. You're ready to command this small army. Consider it your first test.
Instead of unit diversity, I'd like to introduce the concept of unit similarity or unit uniformity. Unitformity. I don't want a unit similarity situation that involves making indiscriminate redundant lines with all of my infantry to reduce their exposure and ameliorate the fact that they're all equally worthless in a melee, all of them reduced entirely to their body blocking properties, entirely relying, in the most pathetic and castrated way possible, on cavalry and range to carry the day. I don't want a unit similarity situation that involves running away from every melee and using nothing but charge bonus for damage. I don't want gameplay that revolves entirely around morale shocks stacking for the rout. That's an uninvolved, limited kind of gameplay, a gameplay where only two of your unit's stats can come into play, and where your enemy's morale is the only thing being checked against, which is the opposite of what unit diversity is supposed to be there for. If I'm only using two of the stats on my units, then it's no surprise that I'm probably also only ever making and using the one unit that gives it to me for the one situation I'm simulating ad nauseum. What this produces is a game where there exists little by way of meaningful action and opportunity. It's difficult to get a distinct feeling for units and what they're capable of and how they perform, and it's difficult to find meaningful actions for them, where tactics and manoeuvring can make opportunities that can progress the battle and get you closer to achieving victory. You're playing defensively and avoiding exposure, you're abusing AI, you're kiting endlessly. Sometimes you're annoyed at your units for being mostly impotent, you're annoyed at them for wasting your attention, simply trying to keep them alive most of the time. You're not rewarded for being ambitious with your timing and your manoeuvring. I've never seen this occur more horribly than in Troy Total War, where, as someone else put it on one of my earlier videos, light swords lose to skirmishers in a melee on legendary difficulty. If light swords can't take out skirmishers, then they can't do anything. Useless tat. A chocolate teapot of a unit. Like nipples on a breastplate. Cross them off and forget about them. Unit diversity my ass. Contrast this even with Medieval 2, where feudal knights going up against themselves have a KD of about 1.2. The hidden difficulty-based combat modifiers damaging the engagement, but not to the extent that protracted melee is simply useless, as in Troy and Three Kingdoms. Three Kingdoms is really bad for this. This is a game where spears always struggle against cavalry, are no good at countering archers, and are terrible in a melee on higher difficulties. So the entire unit category is useless before we even look at the units themselves, but I'll examine them anyway. Every spear and shield unit in the game is a clone of every other. Medium spear guards. The first true hold-the-line spear and shield unit you're likely to get is almost indistinguishable from heavy spear guards, the heavier spear unit. Without these differences between units, then how would you see oncoming infantry and be able to react meaningfully, intervene properly, by desperately pulling back the disorganised and unprepared Yari to have your katanas charge through them to relieve them? Without the differences between units being so substantial, what incentive do I have to recognise that there exists a sole unit of longswords pushing into my highly vulnerable Yari from the right? And what urgency would there be to meet them with katana cavalry that I'm fully willing to bring all the way over to the right flank to ensure this matchup happens instead? What are you doing if you're playing Total War and not making these kinds of observations and decisions and actions and seeking them out as often as possible? What urgency and excitement is there to gameplay if there exists no true threats on the battlefield? Nothing that threatens the player with a failstate if not acknowledged and properly responded to? I still remember the first time I ever had this feeling of disappointment at generic units in Total War. I had never played a strategy game or a real-time tactics game where I felt this before, so it was completely alien to me and it actually made me drop the game for a while. It was with the launch of Medieval 2, believe it or not. I still remember the bland greys and blues and browns of the Spear Militia variants that padded out the campaign map and made me switch off. I would play as England and click on French armies and see entire stacks of this and just zone out. It's always been actually disorienting to me to have all of these ambiguous, shapeless units with no clear meaning or gameplay purpose or avenue of effective utilisation. Maybe I'm alone, but I remember the days when games used to introduce individual units one by one as small but important constituents of a holistic gameplay vision. It was obvious every single unit was handcrafted and was imbued by the developers with purpose, both as a set piece in their own single-player campaign narrative, and also as a gameplay tool for the players to create their own stories during play.
Our research division reports it can design a new type of corvette specially suited to combat multiple fighters. Begin research as soon as possible.
Yes, the fast-tracking turrets from the multi-gun
Commencing
corvette.
fast-tracking turret research.
My favorite.
And here's another one.
Pushing battlefield control. Stand by. Incoming transmission.
I have something very exciting for you, Commander. It is called my Mirage tank. It has the wonderful ability to take on the exact appearance of any organic object it targets. Observe. You see? Isn't she wonderful?
Battle control online. Structure sold.
Wait a minute, didn't Total War do something like this too? Surely not. Not after everything I've just described. That would surely be inconceivable. If Total War did do something like this, which game would that have been, I wonder?
A life of meditation and practice has made this hero into an unmatched expert with a deadly naginata. Few dare stand against his controlled fury. When man and sword are as one, mastery is meaningless. The sword wields the man and makes him unbeatable, a living legend.
Now fast forward to 2021. How would you make the introductory cinematic of heavy spear guards different from the introductory cinematic for medium spear guards? I just can't imagine it at all for some reason. Just like I still can't imagine how I would use them differently from one another on the battlefield. I could think about it more and maybe develop some awareness and ideas, but I would rather spend my time thinking about how to use different units in Shogun 2, where there always exists the possibility of discovery and of insight, and it shouldn't surprise you to know that's exactly what I've been doing instead. I suppose if I had to sum all of this up, it would be to say that anyone who says Shogun 2 lacks unit diversity doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about. I think a case could even be made that they're engaging in projection, accidentally drawing attention to their insecurities, which I honestly can't blame them for having when this is the hill they've chosen to die on. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I'm just obtuse.
What did you call me? Obtuse? Is it deliberate?
Maybe I'm being uncharitable to suspect that unit diversity is just another way of saying don't care looks cool. Maybe I'm wrong. I doubt it. I haven't been yet. But if I am, I would always like to know, which is why I've always invited being challenged. Thanks for watching, and as always, I look forward to experiencing your comment diversity.
I played this Lucid campaign for an hour, and I actually recorded it. Nothing was going wrong or anything. Everything's going very well. I had Salamis, the glass settlement, and I was kicking Egypt's ass. And then I just sort of thought, this isn't fun. I'm going to stop, and I'm not even going to upload this. But that should never happen. That shouldn't happen when you're playing a game. I mean, it's a game.
It's maybe fun. I don't know.
It's the only objective is for it to be fun. Even with all those new units and stuff, it's just it masks. It doesn't mask any of the problems.
Yeah, it's like a smokescreen.
It's different factions, but it's the same game. So.
Yeah, different factions, but they inherit the same problems that every other faction has, and has had until then.
A lot of the units are actually copy-pasted as well.
Yep.
Companion cavalry are actually pasted, and they become, I don't know how you say it, a Gima or a Jima cavalry.
A Jima cavalry, I think.
Yeah, those are exactly the same. It's the same unit. It's just
stats are copy-pasted, it's brainless.
It's literally just a different name, I'm not kidding.
That's not a thing, it just, the units, it seems like they've tried to make it too serious, and it becomes a joke because of how serious it is. Like, the stats for the units, they're so restricted. Like, there's not a single unit of axemen on the Swaby. What the fuck is that? That was what I loved about the original Rome.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that.
Getting chosen axemen, getting barbarians, like getting berserkers, chosen axemen, getting barbarian cavalry. Commit everything along all this. And they've already got a flanking opportunity, so I'm going to work right with them. Charge all that shit. Yeah, there we go. See that? The insta route. And we got the berserking happening. Yeah. This could go well. This could go really well. Got the break in there. Come on, berserkers, come on. Come on, here we go, here we go, here we go. Oh, look at these two units flanking there. This is it, this is what I was trying to do. Here we go. Come on. Get them all. Come on, keep going. Keep going. Come on. Don't stop. Don't stop. Even the peasants. Even the peasants can do well. Steady.
The enemy warlord flees from our warriors. Attack and drive them back in the same way.
Come on, Wavering. Reloading. Come on, get them, get them. Fucking kill them. Catch them, countercharge. Let the berserkers move over. Peasants get away. Peasants can chase down units. And that's it. Oh wait, shit, there's another one. Come on, route you bastards. Fucking... And that's it. And that's what the peasants are good for as well, chasing down routing units. Look at
enemy are
that
crushed
shit.
like beagles beneath your heel. This is a stunning victory.
See how important the timing is and the morale and those routes that just roll across the line? And when you combine units and use them properly, like having axemen ready to commit to that fight that's just a little bit too early, but preserving the clean opportunity for the berserkers. Look at the berserkers. 8 losses, 9 losses. No wait. 17 losses. 8 losses and 17 losses. Look at the kills on the Night Raiders. Look at that. See, the Night Raiders had a good fight. That's when you know you're doing it properly. We weren't crutched. Look at that. 9 casualties to 540. And that is with very hard difficulty. So we overcame the bullshit fucking stat modifiers. You can launch Barbarian Invasion, crank the difficulty up, and still play well enough with just infantry to overcome Roman heavy infantry. And that's why I like this game. Because it fucking worked. Unlike Rome 2. If you appreciate my work, I have a Patreon. Special thanks to Matteo Olivetti, Nerdington, The Rody451, Halcyon, Robert Sparks, and Dake.